So we are, for the first time, doing audio with a microphone to see if there is a difference and if I like that difference. So here goes nothing. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Gwen and today we're going to talk about the books I read in August. I read 6 books and I enjoyed every single one of them, so let's jump into talking about them. The first book that I finished this month was The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang, the second book in the Poppy War trilogy. This one, 5 stars. Hands down, a great second book. In this book, we follow Rin and the Psyche after the events of the Poppy War, and immediately we get thrust into a civil war. We follow Rin trying to figure out who should she trust and how she should navigate her newfound powers. This is an incredibly moving book. There's so many more twists and turns that sometimes I thought I could catch, and then other times I really didn't see some of the things coming. It was incredibly adventurous, dark, and emotional still, just like the first one, and I cannot wait for The Burning God. If you have not read this trilogy or started it, I highly recommend you do. The third book will be coming out this November 17th, and I'm pretty sure any fantasy reader, adult fantasy reader, will definitely enjoy this book series. The second book that I read this month was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, and I gave this book 4.75 stars. In the story, we're following the disappearance of a set of twins from a very small town in the South in the United States, and we follow what happened to them after their disappearance, what happened to their families, and then what happened to their children. It is an incredible, moving read, and it's sectioned into parts in a timeline from the 60s until the 80s, and I think there was a couple a little bit earlier than the 60s. So it's a very moving, drama-filled story that focuses a lot about colorism, racism, and a multitude of other things, but specifically those two, and I highly recommend that everyone read this book. It's incredible. Now, the reason why I didn't give it a full 5 stars was because the first part of this book was a little bit slow moving. Once you jump into part 2 and the rest of the book, it's incredible. Very fast read once you get into it. But yes, if you have not picked up this book, I highly recommend it. It was so good. And I can't stop thinking about most of the characters and what happened to them afterwards. So the third book I picked up this month was A Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I apologize, James, that I cannot pronounce your last name correctly. This is a completed trilogy, and I started it, and I gave this book overall 4.5 stars. So Shadow of What Was Lost is about a boy named Davian who is currently at a school for those who learn magic, but unfortunately, even though he's been there for a few years, his magic seems to not be coming forward, and he has a lot of anxiety about this because his trials are coming up, and if he doesn't pass his trials, he'll become a shadow, and no one wants to become a shadow. And on a different side of the world, a young man woke up without any of his memories and looked down, and he was covered in blood and had no idea how he got that blood. So that's what you're gonna jump into. Now, the reason for 4.5 stars is that even though I really enjoyed this book and had fun, it is kind of like your regular fantasy read. And that's not necessarily bad, but then there's really nothing new in the fantasy. There's nothing like eye-catching. So I understood why I saw some people on my Goodreads give this one even lower, like 3 or 2 stars, because it really is a series that isn't pushing anything new, but I wasn't bored. I quite enjoyed this read a lot. I will say I didn't care about any of the characters until there's a point in the book, and it comes up relatively quickly, that the characters split up. And that's the only hint I will give, or spoiler-wise. That's when I started to care about the characters a bit more. But if you're looking for a fantasy that's not going to surprise you and not give you a lot of anxiety of maybe people will die like every other page, then I highly recommend this series. And I am going to be following up with reading book 2 in September. The fourth book I read this month was Herald the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this is the second installment in the Locked Tomb trilogy. And we follow right after Harrow being woken up and realizing she has to learn a lot about lictorhood. And we follow her and a couple of others through this time period in her life. And there is so many twists and turns and so many unexpected things. And it was a wild ride. I have done a full video with spoilers about this book a couple weeks ago. I will link that up in the cards if you'd like to go and watch that for more of my opinions. Again, this trilogy is all about necromancy in space, and if you haven't picked it up already, I highly recommend you should. The fifth book I picked up this month was Thick and Other Essays by Tressie McMillan Cottom, and I gave 5 stars. This book is about 8 essays written by McMillan Cottom's perspective as a Black, fat, femme woman living in the United States. These essays focus on topics such as the medical field and politics, social media, pop culture, and the academia world in which McMillan Cottom is part of, and how her counterparts and co-workers view her work and her writing throughout the past years that she has been publishing. This book blew me away. Every single time I finished an essay, I just wanted to talk to someone about it. That is how gripping the writing is. You need to read this book. You need to hear this author's words and how important they are, how they've always been important, and how we should be listening, specifically white people. Overall, if you've not heard about this book or you've been thinking about reading this book, I highly recommend that you do. I think every person in the world should read about this and McMillan Cottom's work. Super, super important, and such a great, great writer. The last book I read this month was Booklane and Brooch, 3 short novels by Stephen Erickson, and overall I gave this 4 stars. We're following 3 characters from the main series that appeared in the 3rd book, and they are 2 necromancers that have a manservant who we follow along on all of their escapades. And it's a really fast read, and it was really fun. I just don't feel it was like the best, so that's why it's at 4 stars. But if you do read the Malazan Book of the Fallen, or you enjoy that series a lot and you haven't read these short stories yet, I would highly recommend at least this first collection. It was a joy to read, and actually a really nice way to end the month on a very easy reading pace. And that is it for this wrap up. Thank you so much for watching. For September, I am expecting to read 3 books. One would be the 2nd book in the Lycanthus trilogy that I talked about, and the second one was the 2nd collection of Booklane and Brooch novels. And the 3rd one is by Mickey Kendall, Hood Feminism, right here. As always, linked down below are petitions and donations in which you can sign, donate, or share if you are able for the Black Lives Matter movement, as well as other things going on in the world that are important. If you'd like to follow me anywhere else, all of my social media links are also linked down below. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!